better than everybody else. I mean, it was
But
that
why?
simple.
But why?
But I mean, they were, you know, I went to my first Deep Purple concert in 1973, February 1973, Copenhagen, Denmark. There was a tennis tournament at KB Holland. It R.I.P. unfortunately, as you know, burned down about 6 months ago. But I was all of 9 years old, and I had no idea what I was getting dragged into. So Deep Purple come out, and you know, Richie Blackmore's throwing his guitar around and playing it with his foot, and Ian Gillan is screaming his head and his lungs out. Ian Pace is just back there, hidden behind hair and his glasses, and you know, playing without a shirt on and just sitting there, and it's just, you know, 2 hours of energy. John Lord is sort of holding the whole thing down with the keyboards, and Roger Glover is kind of doing the bass thing and kind of following Richie, following Ian, following John Lord, kind of being the anchor in the whole thing. And it blew my mind. I had never seen energy at that level. I'd never seen performance. I'd never seen personality. It was the biggest thing I'd ever seen.
My name is Donna Davis, and I'm here with Metallica, the hot new heavy metal band from LA. And let's have them start with their name and what they do in the band. And let's start with you.
James Hetfield, rhythm guitar and vocals.
Lars Ulrich, drums and bongs.
Dave Mustaine, lead guitar. Cliff Burton, bass guitar.
There was, obviously, pre-internet and all that stuff, there was a classified ads newspaper in the greater LA area that you could get at 7-Elevens called The Recycler. And there was a very small, you had to really know where to look for it in The Recycler, musicians seeking bands and bands seeking musicians.
Right.
And I put an ad in there. It was free, by the way, it was very cool, for a drummer looking for other musicians to start a band. And I put a couple of sort of obscure new wave of British heavy metal bands in there, like Diamond Head and Tigers Pantang and, I don't know, Witchfinder General or whatever. And there were a lot of people that were calling and say, like, heavy metal, like, you mean like Kansas and Styx and, you know, and,
Yeah.
you know, it's like that, you know, like, you know, yeah. So a guy named Hugh Tanner showed up one day, and he said, can I bring a friend of mine along? And this very shy, introverted, very awkward kid came with him, tall, skinny, and his name was James Hetfield, and we sort of had a jam together, the three of us. Nothing much happened. It was just, we didn't quite connect, but there was something, you know, because this Hugh Tanner guy was sort of the front line, but there was something about this James guy that I felt the kinship to. I called up James Hetfield and I said, listen, let's give it a shot. We'll leave this Hugh Tanner guy out of it. And then James and I connected, and I played him all the singles that I collected in England.
Lars had this drum kit. It was 10 different colors, one cymbal. He hit it, it kept falling over.
Finally he sits down and he's just like, I'm going, you sure this guy played drums before?
You know, a word that was used a lot at that time was the word posers. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of poser bands and a lot of, you know, sort of very radio-friendly hard rock that was played on, you know, the radio, KLOS and so on. And so we wanted to try to do a European kind of almost dirtier, punkier type of hard rock thing that Motorhead and Iron Maiden and these bands were playing.
I answered an ad. It was an ad in the Recycler paper, and it said, looking for a lead guitar player that likes Motorhead, Saxon. And I called up this guy, and he goes, hello? And I said, hello. Calling about the ad in the newspaper. And we just started talking about bands.
After hello, I don't think I said anything for like the next 10 minutes. It was just going blah, 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 blah.
And every band that I would say, he would go, you know? I said, yeah, I like Budgie. Fuck, you know Budgie? fuck, man, you know Motorhead?
So I go to audition for this band, and I took my amps and everything, and I plugged in, and I'm warming up.
He had this shrieking lead sound that would cut through any soundproofing. Everything just was exploding out of everywhere of him.
I said, well, are we going to audition? And they said, no, you got the job.
That was easy.
We figured that if we covered all these songs by all these obscure bands from England that nobody had ever heard of, then we could go up and play, and people would think that they were originals because nobody knew them, obviously.
Great pre-internet.
And so we sort of, yeah, so we learned a set of cover songs. After we were out playing and kind of getting our chops together, then slowly we started writing our own material.
Well, the first songs that we wrote, there was only 2 people writing. I had my songs that were done, and James had his songs that were done. The first record I played on with Metallica had Hit the Lights. Really a dependable bass player. Most bass players, you know, that's you hope they're like that, and he was.
Ron was
totally
got in
outside.
because we needed a bass player, and the bass player, you know, we auditioned about 3 bass players, and none of them were working out at all. And I lived with Ron there, so you know what the fuck? He's a bass player. Let's do it, you know.
When I was 16 years old and hanging out with, you know, all these other guitar players, we had found this place called the International Cafe in Berkeley, and they would let us in. We were underage, and they would also sell us beer.
Amazing.
Yeah, so we would go there all the time. There was always bands playing there. One night we went there, and there's this band called Easy Street that was playing, and I was checking them out, me and my friends, and it looked like they were a cover band. And so they started to play all these cover songs, and I noticed that the bass player was this red-haired freak who's just like was doing this slow motion headbang, but it wasn't called headbanging back then.
Right.
It was just like this slow motion thing. And I was thinking, that guy's nuts.
Thing to take notice of.
2 or 3 years later, I'm with Paul Bailoff. We go to the Stone, and who do I see in Trauma? The same fucking bass player playing the same way, but now he has a wah pedal, and his sound is completely different. And I remember saying to Bailoff, that guy is making this fucking band.
You know, it was me and James and Lars, and all of a sudden Cliff starts going into this solo, and they're just like looking at him with their eyes are wide open, and I'm looking at them, and they're looking at him, and I'm like, yep, this is the guy, this is it. I mean, so I kind of knew right at that point, I'm like, yep, this is the guy they're going to go after. I could tell.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just a thrashing, you know, head banging, crazy, awesome bass player.
What did you think of him?
I thought he was awesome too. He's doing stuff that I can never do, you know.
Right.
So as soon as I saw their reaction, you know, I kind of knew. I kind of knew, and you know, I played several gigs after that with them, and they never actually told me, hey, you know, we're gonna get, you know, we want to get this guy. You know, I kind of heard through the grapevine, but I already knew who it was gonna be. And I remember one time playing in San Francisco, and Cliff was there watching us, and he was standing there out in the rain, and I asked him, hey, I'm like, hey man, do you want to ride? Because he was standing there, he was soaking wet. He's like, no, I'm cool, you know. But you know, I was gonna give him a ride back to wherever you want to go. But you know, I knew he was gonna be the guy.
He's always kind of the outsider, but
Oh yeah, you can see in a lot of pictures. He just
it's like 3 guys and then one, you know.
yeah. He'd sit there and look at you, going, "What are you doing?" You know.
Why are you making a face?
outcast?
Yeah.
He was the outcast.
But that was never my role.
Well, that's what you were saying.
Yeah, it was never my role to be the long-term.
And did you know that at the time?
I knew that, but you know, you kind of put it in the back of your mind because you keep playing shows and you're learning new songs and you're playing, and you know, you're playing all these gigs. You're going to San Francisco, and then you know, you see him play, and I'm like, well, oh yeah, I'm not going to be. Yeah, that wasn't what I was going to do. You know.
So, how'd you get Metallica?
He called me for about 6 months, and finally I decided that was the thing to do.
It was a hip scene, huh?
Well, Trauma got a bit boring.
Yeah. That was a pretty good tune on Metal Massacre, though.
Yeah, but they started to change, you know.
Yeah.
Like, let's be commercial so everyone will like us.
Those guys put out anything after that?
I doubt it. Very seriously.
So give a hand to the major rager here, the new bass player, Cliff Barton.
We had rehearsed for the first time. You knew there was something there, there was a spark, because it just seemed like my playing was able to really stand out from the drums and start to line up more with James, and that the drums and the bass started to have their thing, but that there was also this weird kind of like a connector of some sort where Cliff kind of connected with us and made it all work. Because I didn't really connect with bass players in the beginning with my playing. I hadn't played that much with other people.
And then literally like 3 weeks later, Bailoff calls me up and says, guess who's in Metallica now? Trauma bass player. I'm like, no! Oh my God, they're gonna be fucking so much better.
The one thing that I remember most was the day that the Mechanics became the Four Horsemen. And we were at the rehearsal building, which was a garage at Mark Whitaker's house that we turned into a jam room, hung carpet inside, and we played there. And I went in there, and we'd been listening to Lynyrd Skynyrd because Lynyrd Skynyrd was one of Cliff's favorite bands. We're playing the Mechanics, and Lars goes, "Man, we need to add this fucking slow part, man." I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, well, why would you put a slow part in Mechanics, you know? Because I wrote it after watching that movie with Charles Bronson, the killer that was called The Mechanic, right?
Oh, okay.
And I worked at a gas station, so I kind of melded the two ideas together. And so I thought, all right, and I played dun 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 dun.
Dave was pretty much a Jekyll and Hyde.
When I would go to rehearsal, I would leave the dogs there to watch the drugs. And one day I took one of the dogs with me, and she put her paws up on Ron McGovney's car and scratched the front panel.
The pit bull started jumping on my car, scratching it all up. Knocked him across the room. He wasn't even expecting it.
And the bass player jumped me, and I flipped him.
He threw me against the wall like a big judo throw. And we just got into, get out of here, you're out of the band, you know? All right, okay, you're back in the band.
There's two kinds of drunks. There's happy drunks and there's violent drunks. And I would get violent.
He just went like totally psycho on some people in this restaurant and almost caused this big fight.
We started to see that he was on the road to killing possibly all of us.
But even with Dave, you know, just like I think deep inside we always thought that it wouldn't last. Fucking a couple of things happened and it became too much. The guy couldn't control himself under various situations where he had to, and it just didn't, you know, on a long-term basis, you know, in a couple of years or something, it could, you know, become real problems. So we decided then that whenever there was a good opportunity to get rid of him, you know, that we would do it because we had a whole schedule lined up of gigs and the album and stuff, right?
I don't know, I probably was destined to leave before that because of, you know, the word destiny and the fact that there was just so much talent and so much personality between the, you know, the four of us. I don't know that we could have survived. There was destined to be some kind of an explosion at some point.
You guys like it heavy?
So the last gig we did with Dave was at the Ross 2 weeks ago tonight. And then we fucked around on Sunday. Monday morning we woke him up.
All I remember was waking up and then being circled around me, and I just looked up.
Wake up, Dave, you know.
Get up, you're out of the band. And I said, what, no warning, no second chance?
It was almost like execution style. We just walked in, woke him up, fired him, grabbed him in his shit and took him down to the bus stop, and the whole thing took, 45 minutes.
That time we already had the guy Kirk Hammett from Exodus in mind.
He had a tape and everything he was studying.
Yeah. But we didn't know when we would be able to fit him in the schedule. And then we came out here and sat down and told Johnny that this was what was going on. And then he said that Kurt flew in the same night from San Francisco.
So Exodus is from the Bay Area as well?
Yeah, they're good friends of ours in San Francisco.
So you knew him for...
Oh yeah, we played, I think, three gigs with him over the last 6 months, and we hang out with him, and they're good. They're like the only other, I mean, kind of as intense metal as we are. Yeah. They're not as tight and experienced and shit like that, but they're, you know, in the right direction. Have you heard any of their material?
No.
I think that the lineup that we have happening now, you know, like when me and James first got this band together, it was always like fucking Ron and Dave. It just wasn't happening. Like, you know, when you thought ahead 5 years, you couldn't picture any of them still in the band, you know, and now none of them are in the band. But right now, I think we're fairly confident that this lineup is gonna, you know, stay tight.
And then, like, literally, like 4 weeks later, I get the phone call to join Metallica.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I was so stoked was because I would get to, like, finally meet this guy who I saw on Easy Street and in Trauma and just find out what he's all about. I was more curious about him as a person than anything else.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I first went out there to audition for the band, Cliff was the first person I met because James and Lars were still sleeping. It was like 6 o'clock in the evening, and Cliff had been up for a while. And so I hung out with Cliff and figured out that, you know, he was a pretty cool guy, you know.
We're gonna turn it over now to the newest member, Mr. Kirk Hammett. He's gonna melt your face with his guitar.
The very first night that I played with him, this quote-unquote audition, Lars kept on looking at James, and James kept on looking at Lars. They kept on smiling, and I was going, what's up with these guys? Are they in love with each other or something? What's going on? But I later found out that they were so happy that the other person playing guitar was not their old guitar player. And they were so happy that he is out of the picture, and I was in the picture with a lot of potential and a lot of possibilities.
Well,
I mean, they saw all that stuff even before I saw it, you know? They never really told me that I was in the band. I mean, I figured it out when Lars said, okay, in about 3 weeks, we're going to go up to upstate New York, and we're going to record our first...
WRTN Inertia, the home of Midnight Metal. Of course, tonight dedicating the entire show to Cliff Burton of Metallica, who died early this Saturday morning in a tragic auto accident. The tour bus of Metallica, of course, going off the road during their tour in Sweden, and just a lot of people calling up who did not know of that, and there are, on the other hand, a lot of people saying that they heard about that through the grapevine. It was early this Saturday morning that it happened. Metallica's minivan, or tour bus, whatever you want to call it, was on way to Copenhagen from a gig in Sweden, and as we have learned, the driver of the bus fell asleep and causing the van or tour bus to go off the road. As soon as the van collided and went off the road, Cliff was pinned, and they were all asleep. The whole band was asleep. The driver was driving, and Cliff was pinned in his bunk, and the rest of the members, like James, Kirk, and Lars, had abrasions. Lars broke his foot, and all three of the guys checked into a hospital and were released. I believe this afternoon. One of Metallica's roadies, I believe it was the drum roadie, was seriously injured, and I think he is in critical condition right now.
Jason Newsted on bass guitar.
I think it had to be extremely bittersweet for him. Like a dream come true, but I'm stepping into someone's shoes who can never be filled. It must have been very difficult. And for him and for us, it was difficult. It just truly was. And, you know, Psych 101 will tell you that all our anger, our grief and sadness got directed at him.
I mean, we were pretty young still, and I can only talk about myself during that period, but I did not know how to process it. You know, I hadn't lost someone like that under those circumstances. You know, I don't think any of us had. And so I think subconsciously we just buried a lot of stuff, and that stuff was struggling to get out.
He was an easy target, and I think there were a couple things about Jason, you know, his personality. He felt he was goofy enough to take it, which was a positive for him. I think he was such a fan, and we hated that. We hated that part. We wanted to unfan him and become
as hard as you were.
Yeah, as hard as we were. So trying to beat the fan out of him, trying to also get him to play something different, like Cliff would. You know, he played with a pick, and he would follow whatever I would do. And I remember there were times where I'd be playing, I'd just turn around so he couldn't see what I was playing, so he couldn't follow me. It's like, do whatever you want to do, you know? So, but obviously live, he fit right in. He was a great force, and you heard the bass live. So, and he wasn't afraid to step up to the mic and bark whenever he felt like it. And he would sweat. He would really sweat. And he put a lot into the live show. So that gained a lot of respect, at least I think for us, once we started touring with him.
And I think subconsciously a lot of it got escaped through the music. I mean, I honestly believe that.
Darkness imprisoning me, all that I see.
You know, getting nostalgic.
Yeah.
You know, and thinking, my God, look at all the people that have helped us along the way, and look who are still around.
Yeah.
Let's say thank you to them.
One of our best experiences as far as, like, you know, celebrating time that has passed, for sure.
29 years, Ron McGovney.
Hey you, don't miss out our next video. Hit that subscribe button for exclusive videos and join our awesome community and enjoy. Subscribe now.